Start recording. Hello everyone and welcome to Handmade Hero, the show where we code a complete game live on stream on Twitch. No engines, no libraries, although I say that every day, and in truth, I did also say that our asset processor, since it is not part of the game, could use libraries. I said I do not have a problem having that use libraries. And the reason that I mentioned that is because we do actually have a choice today of using a library. And because people wrote in on Twitter and sort of said this, they were saying, since the asset processor is allowed to use libraries, and I said that, could we use a library there for opening the fonts? And I am considering that. So basically, there's two ways that we can really do it in the asset processor. One is that we just get the fonts from Windows, right? And the other is that we use some kind of library. Now, originally my assumption was I'd just show you how to get them from Windows because, well, it's very direct, and, when you're running the asset processor on Windows, you can just extract the fonts, and whatever other platform you would use, Linux or something, has a similar API you could use to extract the fonts, and off you go, right? But I don't know. I thought about it when people were saying maybe you should use a library here. I thought about it, and the thing that I thought of was people always ask me on the stream all the time, if you were going to use a library, what libraries would you use, right? And I always say the STB libraries. And so, I don't know. My thinking was I could decide to use a library here to show you how to use an STB library. Because as I have said over and over again on the stream, if I was going to use a library, the libraries that I would use would be the STB libraries. They're libraries written by Sean Barrett. They're designed with a game programmer in mind. They're written in a very convenient way to integrate into your product. And so I don't know. So I don't know if people have strong feelings on that one way or the other. So I thought maybe what I'd do today was show you how to get the fonts with an STB library, show you how to use one of those libraries because they are libraries that I recommend using. And this would pretty much be our only time when we could do this because, like I said before, in the actual game code, I don't want to use any libraries, right? That's just kind of a rule for the game itself. It's just an arbitrary rule, it's true, but it's just part of the thing that I wanted to do with the series was we write everything in the game from scratch, so the entire code for the game is completely there and written by us, right? So I don't know. So probably what I'll do is we'll do that today because it seemed like a reasonable request from people. And then if it ends up bothering people, we can just show also how to do it directly through Windows or something like that. But we'll see. So that's what I would say. So maybe that's what we'll do today. That seemed like a reasonable request, and it seemed like something we could do. And it has the fringe benefit of if somebody wanted to use this library in their actual game, now they would know how to do it. And they would know how to use all the STB libraries, really, because they all kind of work the same way. And they're a great set of libraries that is really easy for you to use, even if you are very meticulous about low-level things like I am. They are libraries that won't cause you pain and suffering like a lot of them will. So, if you're going to do that, how would you do that? If you're going to use STB libraries, you would search like this, right? You search for STB libraries and you get them here. And you can go to this STB page, right? It's nothing/STB. And he's got all of these libraries in here. Now, several of these libraries are pretty darn useful. Like STB image is like a great way to quickly add image loading to your code, right? So if you take a look at it here, it's like this one file, right? And it reads like a bunch of stuff, right? It reads like JPEG, PNG, BMAP, PSD, TG, right? And it doesn't read like the complete spec of all of them usually. It just reads the part that game developers usually care about, right? So this is just like when people ask me if you were going to use libraries, which ones would you use? These would be the ones that I would recommend using, or at least it'd be the place that I would recommend looking first, because if it does the thing that you want, these are probably the libraries that will cause you the least pain and suffering. They are also public domain, so there is no restrictions on using them. You can redistribute them. You don't have to do anything in particular on your credit screen for them. It's purely like, it's code that's free for you to use in every possible way. And, it would be nice to probably to thank Sean Barrett if you ship one of them, but you're not even obligated to do that. And so you can see a little description here that talks about all the different ones. And the one that you would be interested in particular, if you wanted to do the font stuff, is STB TrueType, right? Which is this one here. And STB TrueType is a library that it literally does exactly the thing that we want, which is it is a TrueType font rasterizer, right? It literally does exactly the thing that I said our asset processor would want. Okay. So the structure of one of these libraries is very straightforward. There is one file. He ships it as an H file, right? So you can see all of these are H files. And the way that they work, you can look inside one, right? STB TrueType. The way that they work is inside the H file, there's actually a pound define that you pound define to say whether you want the implementation or just the header. So you actually, it's actually two files in one. It's sort of like the H and the CPP file, or in this case, C file, wrapped up into one file. So you don't need an H and a CPP, you just need the one file. And then what you do is if you want the actual implementation, the part that's the C file, the .c file, then you pound define typically something like this. And if you don't want that, you just don't define it. And then it acts like a normal H file because all of the actual implementation, like all of this stuff, won't get compiled in, right? You can kind of see if I come back to it here, where would that be? Where is the if def? Almost there. Where are we? Here it is. This if def, right, kills everything after it if you don't define STB TrueType implementation. So if you don't define STB TrueType implementation, it kills the entire C code and it just acts like an H file. Whereas if you do define that, then it acts as a C file so that you can build it into the game, right? So that's it. That's like all you'd have to do if you want to use it. And I can kind of show you, roughly how that would work, right? So let's say we want to use this thing. You would just download it from here, right? You can, I think you can just actually, right from the STB TrueType page, I think there's usually like a little download button somewhere, right? Isn't there somewhere? Maybe? No? Yeah. I don't use GitHub, in case you were wondering. So I have no idea how you download a file. Pulse, issues, TrueType, quickly jump, copy file. Seriously, guys? Is there a download button? Okay. Well, I don't know. How about that? That's no good. Well, I have no idea. So I would tell you how to download this. I have no idea how to download it. So yeah, I feel like this should be really obvious. I don't really know why it's not. Maybe I'm missing something. Maybe if you were logged in, it would be easier to do. But that's kind of weird. So let's click on raw. Okay, there we go. So raw is just actually does link to it. So I don't know if that's what they intended, but that'd work, right? Because there's the raw file. So yeah, so all I guess you'd have to do is click on raw, click on save as. Sorry to those of you who are GitHub experts, that is probably not the recommended way, but those of us who are GitHub impaired. So if we're going to download this guy and save it in here, right? Now we've got STB TrueType. And like I said, the big difference between STB TrueType libraries and the reason why I feel like they are, something that I consider for my own coding, unlike a lot of libraries, is because they're just really sensibly made and they're really easy to maintain and keep using in your source code because there's just one file and it integrates really cleanly. So for example, right, if we wanted to in handmade.cpp, right, we could go ahead here and actually just do some rendering with STB TrueType. Let's say we wanted to kind of put it in here, and I'm just going to drop it right in the middle of some code here as an example. And then we'll go into the asset processor, and I'll show you how we would integrate it in. So if you want to do it, you would literally, we could just do TrueType.h. And like I said, if you take a look at how that works, there's an STB TrueType implementation, right? In here, you would pound define that first, and you would set that to 1 or something. You would like just have to pound define it, right? So if you were going to do that, that basically says I want the implementation as well, and then you just compile. And like you can see, like that is it, right? And I really want to underscore this. Like this is why this is a big deal. Okay, we didn't have to download 50,000 files. We didn't have to deal with someone's make system. We didn't have to figure out how they all link together or what compile time switches they need or anything else. It's like I just included Sean Barrett's TrueType font rasterizer in my game with 2 lines of code, right? And it just worked. That's a really big deal, and nobody else pretty much does this. There are a few rare exceptions of people who have followed his lead, but that is a pretty big deal. And it goes a long way towards giving me the confidence that if I use this thing, I can maintain it easily. I don't have to worry about all of these problems that I'm going to inherit because of the way this library works and is sprawling and God knows what and depends on 50 million things and all this other stuff, right? Download 1 file, put 2 lines of code in, and now you have a TrueType rasterizing library built into your game, okay? So that's really important. So like I said, I'm just going to write a little something here to show you how the rasterization from the library works, and then we're going to move over to the asset processor, which is where this actually belongs, and we'll go through the actual work of actually building out the thing that will make a demonstration version of fonts processing into the asset file. All right. So if I go into STB TrueType and take a look at it, one of the great things about it, again, you know, to extol the virtues further, is that if you take a look at what happens in here, the H file itself includes the documentation. So here are some sample programs included right in the H file for you to use. So I don't remember how to use Sean Barrett's TrueType rasterizer. It does not matter that I don't remember that, right? Because it's actually the case that, you know, the H file itself tells me how to use it, right? And you can kind of see some examples here. This is a text in 3D API example. And you can kind of see that it actually has the information that we want exactly. So here is STB bake font bitmap, right? Which is actually a thing that if you give it a size rectangle, it will actually pack all of the fonts into that rectangle exactly like what we might want in a game, right? So he even had built in the thing that we probably want to do. Now, we don't have to do that. We could instead do something a little bit more straightforward and do something where we just get the code point bitmap, where we're basically saying, let's just get 1 bitmap of 1 letter. And since I want to kind of show a little bit more of this process, I'm not going to use this. But if you were using this library, and again, one of the reasons I'm doing this is to kind of give you an example of how to use a library and what makes a good library, since it is something that's asked very often, you can see that he's sort of almost done some of the work for you here. It's like there's a utility function that actually does a bunch of stuff that you might want to do, right? All right, so if we take a look here, this is more what I'm interested in. This is a function that basically generates a bitmap for a given code point, a given Unicode code point, right? And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make a little function here, right? Internal, void. I'm just going to make a little function here that does this exact thing, right? So here is the function that I want to call. It's called STB init font. We need to give it a place to store the font information, which is just gets declared on the stack. This is STB TT font info. You pass an address to that. And then I need some kind of a buffer, right, into which it will dump that font information, right? I'm sorry, not dump that, into which, or I should say from which it will read that font information, right? So this would be the font file itself. Now, we already have a way to do this in Handmade Hero, right? We have the stuff in Handmade Platform that's like debug, read entire file, right? We've got this thing right here. So we actually have a way of pretty quickly doing exactly what STB wants us to do. And again, you know, just not to extol Sean's virtues too extensively here, but again, it's set up exactly the way I want. He's not forcing me to pass him a file handle. He's not forcing me to pass him a file name. He's assuming that I already have ways to read files and that I'm going to want to read files the way I read files. So he just takes a memory buffer of the file. That's exactly what I want, right? It's exactly what I want. It minimizes dependencies. It makes it so that I don't have to work around him. He's working around me, right? And that's really great. Again, another sign of an intelligently made library. It doesn't force its file I/O on you, right? So I can do this, right? I can read the file. So here's our TTF file. I can say I want to take platform, debug, read entire file. And then I can just pass it some TrueType font name, right? So I don't know what TrueType font we want to read, but I can, for example, pick one out of Windows. In here, you can see a giant set of fonts, and Arial.ttf is almost always there. So I can perhaps just say we will use Arial for the time being, right? So I will go ahead and do debug read entire file to read out this font file. And then after that font file is read, I will just pass the entire thing to Sean, right? So I'll say, hey, Sean, here's the contents of that file. Work your magic. And that is it. Now, get font offset for index, I believe, is just a thing. You know what? To be honest with you, I don't really know what that does. I don't remember. So let's see what that does. Init font. Let's see here. Init font takes an offset into the data. Given an offset into the file that defines a font, this function builds the necessary cache info for the rest of the system. You must allocate the STB font yourself. Okay. So probably this is just if there's multiple fonts in a file, I would say. So stbtt get font offset for index. I believe that is what that does. Each EF file, TTC file, may have more than one font. Each font has a sequential index number starting from 0. Call this function to get the font for a given index, right? And so we'll just load the first font out of there, but so that does exactly what we guessed it would do. If you were trying to load a TTF file that had more than one font in it, this would be your jam. So that would init the font. Then if we want to get a bitmap out of the font, we call stb get code point bitmap. Remember, like I said on the previous stream, a code point, that's the name in Unicode for a particular sort of identifier for a glyph. It's a numerical identifier that uniquely identifies a particular glyph, like the letter T, the Chinese symbol for meat, whatever you want, that. So if I come in here and say, okay, we got font, we're passing it the font that we just sort of initialized, and then what we would like to do is we would like to give it some information about what we want it to do for getting that bitmap, and we want to get back some information from it. Okay, so what is that information? Well, first of all, you can see here that this C, I happen to just kind of know how this works, but again, if you didn't know how it works, you'd go in here to the documentation. It would tell you what it is: scale X, scale Y, the code point, the width, the height, the X offset, the Y offset, et cetera, right? And so what that does is that allows me to basically get back information about what the code point bitmap was that was generated, and the return value is actually the bitmap. And it's literally the bitmap exactly the way that we've been thinking about bitmaps. The only difference here is it's a monochrome bitmap. Like I was talking about yesterday, there's really no need to store colors in fonts because most fonts don't have color information. They're just black and white. So really all you're getting is a 0 to 255, which is about the anti-aliasing of the font. And that's it, right? So we'll start with that, right? We'll do a little thing here where we go ahead and get the bitmap. So this is the mono bitmap, right? Get code point bitmap. This is the font that we want, right? And then we've got scale X, scale Y. If the 0, I believe, if you pass into scale X, just means whatever the scale would be, is my assumption, given the Y scale, right? Now, the Y scale is a little tricky. And the reason for that is because the Y scale is not actually given in units that you would care about in a TrueType font file. I think it's given in points or something like this. And typically we want pixels. And so again, being a pretty cool library, Sean already knew that. And so what he did is he provided a utility function for us, right? Which is STB scale for pixel height. And what that does is it says, given the pixels and a particular font, produce the value I should ask you for if I were to want this many pixels tall for the total font height, right? So that's a pretty great thing right there, right? We can just say, like, you know what? We want a 20 pixel tall thing. Maybe since this is a, a test one, we want something higher, like 128, right? So it's a big old tall letter, and that's fine. So we do STB code point bitmap. That's going to get that for us at 128 pixels tall. We then pass the actual Unicode code point that we want. Now, since the Unicode code points and the ANSI code points happen to correspond for the letters that we would care about in ASCII, we could just say that the letter that we want is an S for Sean, or perhaps he would prefer an N for nothings. I don't know. I didn't ask him ahead of time, but presumably one of those two. We will ask for an N. And then when we get back our width and height, again, if we go back to the documentation for get code point metrics, get code point bitmap rather, you can see that at the end here, we get back a bunch of information, right? So we can get a width, we can get a height, we can get an X offset, and we can get a Y offset. And what are those values, right? Well, the width and height are just how big that bitmap is that comes back, just like we've been working with this whole time. And the X offset and the Y offset are this sort of, if he's giving us back a bitmap that I believe that, well, actually, you know what? I don't know. I think he gives us back a bitmap that's the tightest bound bitmap. So it's basically a bitmap that has no empty space around it, I believe. We'll see in a second. And the X offset and the Y offset are how you would displace that bitmap to align it with the rest of the font, I believe. Meaning that, if you have the letter A, well, it's kind of a tiny bitmap. And so it has to be adjusted relative to an H, which is much taller, in order to line them up potentially, right? So the Y offset might be a thing. That's all. But we'll play around with that in a second. I'm also pretty sure that Sean does top-down bitmaps. So we're going to have a little upside-down fun happening here. And I don't know if he supports, top to bottom, right? So I don't think there's any way to do bottom up in his system. So we're going to have to do a flip of the result of this. But that's basically it. I think there's a free in here probably for code point bitmap. Hopefully, because he had to allocate some memory for it. Am I misremembering this? Free. STB free. Do not know. Do not know. Feel like it does need to be free. Don't remember. But I feel like we should know. So get code point bitmap. Does it say in the documentation? So I guess, it's right above it. The one place I did not look. So after we do that, we'll get rid of it, right? So this is really all there is to it. There's some more stuff that we're going to do here, but we'll call this like make nothings test or something, right? And we'll deal with that in a second. But okay, so if we take a look here, cannot convert from void star to outside carousel. So he wants these as U8 stars for whatever reason. So we'll go ahead and pass this. Probably because we're compiling in C++ mode. He compiles in C, so he probably never even knows about those sorts of things. Free bitmap does not take one. That's true. Doesn't. Takes a user data in case you wanted to pass like an arena thing or something to it. So that's really it. That's the entirety of how we would have to actually interface with this library. Again, really, really good work here, right? If all libraries were written this way, Handmade Hero would probably be called, let's use a ton of libraries to make our game, right? But they never are, and so there you go. But anyway, so really, really nice. I tried to point out a number of things that it does right, but you can just intuit. You can see this was an arbitrary code base, handmade hero Sean's never seen before, right? It just drops in, right? It just drops right on in. And the amount of work you had to do to get out the thing you wanted was minimal, right? Was minimal. Compare this to any, say, modern Microsoft API or any of the sorts of things that you see these days, and it's just laughable how huge they are and how many lines of code it takes to do basic things. And this right here is exactly what you actually want out of a library. You just want whatever it was that you were going to do, you want to just call that thing and that's it, right? And he's really, again, just kind of showing how it's done. That is how it's done. So let's actually see that this worked. Let's actually do something here. Let's translate his bitmap into one of the bitmaps that we could use, for example, like a loaded bitmap, right? So I believe we have a make empty bitmap call here, like this. So let's go ahead and do make empty bitmap, and we'll just we'll just call this at startup to make ourselves a bitmap of the letter N, right? So let's do that. So okay, we'll put the memory arena in here that we need it to use. I think that's about it. So we'll just say, okay, make an empty bitmap. We know what the width and height would be because Sean told us what they were, and we don't need it to clear to 0 because we're about to actually do all of that work ourselves, right? So we can then step through every sort of pixel here. Oops, every sort of pixel that's in this bitmap. And we can do our own translation to our style of bitmap, which happens to be 32 bits per pixel, not, 4 bytes per pixel, so I should probably say it, rather than 1 byte per pixel. Sean is 8 bits per pixel, right, for mono. So all we would have to do to that, again, not particularly tricky. All we have to do that is we take our loaded bitmap that we get here, so loaded bitmap result. And we'd probably just return that as well. There's our loaded bitmap. Let's go ahead and return that here. All we would have to do is be able to access our loaded bitmap. That's, again, pretty easy. It's just the address is obviously just going to be that result memory. In fact, we could actually do this with the sort of the standard row pointer thing that we normally do. We could just say, okay, we've got sort of the destination. And here we've got sort of our row. This is our dest row. That's going to be our result memory. And this is going to be dest row. And we just do part dest ++, so writing into the destination. And what we want to do here is we just want to write in essentially white with Sean's value as the alpha, right? So we kind of want something where it's going to be a pre-multiplied alpha bitmap, I guess would be the way to say it, right? And so if you think about what a pre-multiplied alpha bitmap would be, it's just the alpha value replicated, right? Because if we're going to have 1, 1, 1 as the color, and we're multiplying by the alpha value, it's just going to be the alpha value in all 4 channels, right? So really all we're talking about here is doing that pack again, right? So whatever the alpha is, it's just the alpha goes there, the alpha goes here, the alpha goes here, and the alpha goes here, right, is all that we would be talking about, right? So that alpha value is just going to be the mono bitmap pointer, and we're just going to call that source. Since we read the source in order, and Sean, I believe, packs them densely, it's literally just reading it out one by one. And then at the end here, we just advance by our pitch. Now, we started a half hour late, so we've got a whole half hour to go here. We're nowhere near Q&A, so nobody get too excited about that. But yeah, so there we go. So that's roughly what we're looking at here. Got to do a little bit of cleanup, but I think that's about it. So it looks like these are actually ints there, right? So those are S, 32, oops, not that, but rather that. And I think that is basically it. So let's see, we've got our alpha, that's missing an OR sign. Other than that, we are good to go. So that just alpha replicates out there and produces, the color bitmap for a mono bitmap, right? Nothing particularly weird going on there. So that would create us a bitmap, assuming that I haven't horribly ruined everything. by some kind of mistake in the code. And so I'll just go ahead and add in here to where we kind of store random stuff like this. I think we tend to have a few of these sitting around. Test font or something. And I will just make it so that game state test font, right, is going to be made like that, right? So down in here when we first start up the game, after we initialize the world arena, let's say, sure, why not? We'll just go ahead and make the test font like so, and I'll just, sure, use the world arena. Does not matter, do not care, right? So there we go. So in theory, you know, if I haven't done anything horrible, that will at least run. We won't see anything on the screen because we're never drawing anything with that bitmap, but we can rectify that very quickly, certainly. So let's go ahead and there we go. So that's actually creating the bitmap. We're just not running it. So let's go ahead now and run it. And I feel like the right place to put this would be in our head spewing code. That seems like kind of the obvious place for it. So instead of spewing heads, we could instead just spew a ton of, yeah, I mean, a ton of ends. Why not, right? So we've got the particle being rendered here. I'll go ahead and say, let's not do that. Instead of doing that, let's go ahead and do our test font, which I assume would work fine. Push bitmap. What is the problem? Loaded bitmap needs to be an address. That's fine. And so let's run it and see how we did. Oh, so disappointing. Where are they? That's just cruel, really, right? When you think about it. So let's go back up here. Let's step into this and see what I did wrong there. What did I call that function? I don't even remember. Make nothing's test. So let's see here. What did we do wrong? Let's step in. Let's step into this guy. Destro plus equals result pitch. This equals destro. That part's correct. The source steps through for every pixel, which is also correct. That looks roughly right to me. That looks roughly right, I would say. So I'm going to go ahead. I don't see anything obviously wrong, so I'm going to continue with what I just said and step into it. I think that's the only sane thing to do. I think that's the only sane thing to do. So let's go ahead and go here. I assume we actually load this file correctly. Let's find out if that's true. We do. We can see that it actually has some contents there. We'll initialize the font. We'll take a look. Num glyphs 3400. That's a lot of glyphs. Must have a lot of Unicode in there in Arial. So it looks, you know, I mean, I feel like that's a reasonable set of things there, certainly. Let's see how mono bitmap works. So mono bitmap comes back just fine. The width and the height, 66 and 83, totally seem reasonable to me. Nothing particularly weird going on there. So let's see here, source and dest. So we come through here. Let's take a look. Our alpha value here is 1. I'm going to set a breakpoint there. So we should have been seeing something. I mean, an alpha value of 4 is certainly very faint, but we should have been seeing something, right? I'm going to step to the next row. I mean, there's an alpha value of 70, so clearly I messed something up. You know, unsurprisingly, Sean did not make a mistake. I made a mistake. You know, that's just the way it goes sometimes. Now, it could be that these aren't getting extended to 32-bit. That is a very possible thing. Let's see if that's true. So I'm going to take a look at one previous from the dest. I want to see what its hexadecimal value is. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. What was the alpha value last time around? Oh, of course, you won't tell me. So let's see what the alpha value is now. It's FF. So my destination is FF. So I don't know what's... that looks like I'm doing it properly, right? At least it seems like it to me. Yeah, so that would be full alpha, full white, right? So that seems pretty good to me. Width, height, pitch. So I don't know what's going on there. That's a little odd to me, to be honest. That seems a little odd. So let's hop down to our particle system and see if I did something separately stupid, because that looks like it's a reasonable thing to want to do. Hop over here. All right. So let's take a look at game state test font. Oops. State test font. And let's take a look at that memory. In fact, I could probably just do this and look at that location. So, you know, pretty clearly there is data there. This should be drawing. So I don't really super understand why I'm not seeing anything there. That feels kind of odd to me. So I must be missing some obvious thing. Right. That is the problem right there. We've never updated our makeEmptyBitmap function to obey the new rules of bitmaps. Right? You remember this? Tell me you remember this. Sort of using old test code that we don't really use for anything anymore. So we need to initialize some other things that are based on the inputs to this function, right? We need to actually do width over height, right? And I could do a safe ratio 1 of width over height, right, for example. And the align percentage, again, we don't care about. We can just center the n about itself, and that's all fine. So that's better. So yeah, just some old stale code there. Not really a big deal. Again, really easy to track down. So there's our ends, as lovely as they are. And so you can see something about our ends. I suppose our ends are a little bit large, so maybe we should, you know, that's pretty big. Maybe we should go in here and turn those down a little bit. You know, just say maybe that small. There we go. So there's our ends, for, of course, standing for nothings. And if you take a look at what's going on there, you can see that the ends are, well, I guess you might not know, right? If you looked at the ends, you might not know whether the ends are upside down or left to right flipped, right? You can't really tell, but you do know that something's wrong with the ends, right? They're not the correct way around. And so I happen to know just because I've used STB library for it, but I pointed out in the comments just a minute ago, is that the STB library assumes that bitmaps are top-down, right? And so top-down bitmaps are the opposite of our convention. Our convention for bitmaps is bottom-up. So what we want to do for this is we want to flip his bitmaps around when we load them, so our ends will be right ways round, right? So if we were to do that, if we were to go into the code here, we've already got something that's converting it from mono to color, right? So really all we need to do here is just do this, you know, make this bitmap right the other ways around, which would be really easy for us to do, right? We could just step the pitch backwards and start out on the last row, right? We'd just start at, you know, pre-advance the pointer to be starting at that last row, and then we just write the rows in reverse order. That's a pretty trivial way to flip it around. And then, hey, guess what? Our ends are right side up. But it's something to be aware of, right? The STB library has that convention, and so when we do our asset processing, we need that to work. Now that's it. That's all, right? Like I said, this is why when people ask me if you're going to use libraries, which would you use? And I always say the STB libraries, because without fail, they go in clean, they're easy to use, they're thought through. You know, it's a very, very good set of architectural libraries. that can really quickly give you access to a bunch of really great stuff without all the headache and problematic aspects that plague almost all libraries, which is honestly why I don't use any libraries at work other than occasionally the STB libraries. But like I said, I don't want to have any library usage in the actual game proper. So now that I've kind of shown you how that works in a way that you can immediately see, really where this belongs is in the asset builder, where I said that libraries were okay. And so if I were to go ahead and drop that back in here, we can sort of include this TrueType library, Sean's TrueType library, in our asset builder. And then when we're doing our actual our loads and stuff to loading and processing our like bitmaps and waves and that stuff, we can do something here where we will process the actual fonts, right? Let me have that out right now because it's kind of made to be working in how should I say this? It's we wrote it with like the arena and the load tar file and whatever. Like it's not the right type of code, but we're going to want to use basically that same code, so I don't want to delete it, right? We're going to be able to use that. So I can go ahead and get rid of all the that stuff now. You know, that can go away, and we can go ahead and do that. And so now we're back to the way we were building before, but I have moved the STB library out of the game where I said no libraries allowed into the asset processor where I said libraries are fine. So if it were in here, we now have to have a way of sort of processing these fonts into a usable format by the game, right? And we have a couple different ways we can do that, but as you can see, you know, in our game asset system, you know, the most basic way we could do that is we could just literally shove them into the asset arrays directly, right? That's something we could do, and maybe that's the first thing we should do. That's what we'll do today. But then the next thing we're going to have to do is actually extend our asset formats to account for fonts, because like I said, there's things like kerning tables and stuff like that that we want to have in there, and so we'd like to have that information stored in the file so that it can be loaded out, right? Let's go ahead and take a look at how we might do that. We have, you know, the asset. I kind of want to merge these two things. I kind of want to merge the asset tag ID stuff and the file format stuff. And you know, it's, you know, who's to stop me, right? It's kind of hard to stop me, you have to admit. So what I might do is do that, right? Bam, there it is. Don't see why not. Can't think of a reason why not. Delete file, handmade, asset, type ID. Goodbye. So that's it for that. It was fun while it lasted, and it didn't last. And now it's gone. And, you know, not really that sentimental about death. So that's it. That's all she wrote. So now in here, if we wanted to, we could do something absolutely ridiculous. I don't know that this is really what we want to do. It seems like it might be a little ill-conceived. I'm going to do it anyway, because why not? What I'm going to do is say, all right, there's an asset here that's just like asset font, right? This is a really crazy abuse of our asset system. I don't really want to advocate doing this. I'm just going to do it because we can. Yeah, I mean, we just can. There's really no other way to say it than that. So I'm just going to say asset font, and then I'm going to go into the test asset builder, and I'm going to have it actually operate on these guys, right? Excuse me. So yeah. So if I come in here for asset font, I'm going to now do sort of the nonsense that we were doing before, this sort of thing, right? I'm going to do that, but I'm going to do it for a font. And I'm going to do it probably in a pretty weird way. I'm going to just generate, like when it does these things, I'll just have a thing that's like right font, I guess. I don't know. Where do we want to put this? We had kind of broken this up into multiple files just for kind of laughs, I guess, for lack of a better term. But, you know, we could do a thing in here where we're just like, okay, it's definitely a non-hero. So right in here, I guess I'll do begin asset type, assets, asset font. And then I'll do end asset type, assets. And yeah, then we'll just do a for I loop here, right? Where we go over a bunch of characters. So like, you know, what character are we going to do? I don't know. Let's go ahead and do for char character, or I could even do a U32 character equals A. Character is less than or equal to Z. Maybe I'll do capitals because let's just do capitals, right? And we'll just have it create all of the letters from A to Z and shove them straight into the asset system. Now, if you remember the way that we did this, right, we could do a thing like this where we added tags. And so all I'm going to do is introduce a tag called code point, UTF code point, something like this, or Unicode code point. And I'm just going to go ahead and straight up tag the asset with the Unicode code point, right? There it is. I will talk in a while about why this is a really fantastically bad idea, what I'm doing, although maybe, you know, it's something we want to think a little bit harder about in the future. But anyway, what I want to do here is say add a character asset, right? And I'm going to do that by using the STB library, right? So I'm going to do add character asset, and I'm going to do this in a crazily inefficient way. Absolutely 100% irresponsible, just horrifically irresponsible way, but I'm going to do it anyway because this is an asset processor, and at the moment we literally just don't care about its speed. Later on, and it's trivial to optimize this, but later on we could do that. I am literally going to do that. I am going to reload the entire font file and make Sean parse it every darn time. I know that's rude. Like I said, no one will be timing us, so it's fine. So then we're going to have up here, we're going to have that font code. It's going to actually be called add character asset, right? And we're going to take the gloves off here, and we're going to go ahead and get that working. And what that's going to take is it's going to take that asset structure, I think. Is that what it takes? I think that's what it takes. And it's going to take the font file, and then it's going to take the code point, right? And so in here, we're going to load, I think we have already have a thing that reads an entire file right here, right? Again, we just kind of emulated that because we wanted to be able to cut and paste the code, essentially. So we know that we can just call read entire file. We know that we can pass the font file in, like so. And then I assume that we've got a way to free the entire file, right? So I assume we can do something here where we just do a free entire file, a free file, I don't know what. Might just be free. I don't really know. What do we do? Read entire file. Read result. Results.free. I have no idea what we did with this code. Maybe we didn't even bother freeing them? I have no idea. Are you as perplexed about this as I am? I literally don't even remember what we did with this code. Like, it's so far out of my brain at this point. Yeah, it looks that way. Oh. Wow, no. You know what? We were kind of clever here. Interesting. Interesting. We did it down here. So it's all deferred free. All right. That's crazy. That is really kind of crazy. All right. Well, I don't even know what to say about that other than that's crazy town, but I guess that's where we're at. So we were kind of sly. I was thinking that the asset processor was just kind of, you know, a stupid example thing, but I guess we actually even cared about our memory usage. Yeah, well, all right. Good job, Handmade Hero. Nice work on that one. All right, so anyway, if we read the entire file in here, I just kind of want to free it because we don't need it. This is not like the other things where we needed to keep them around. We don't need to keep anything around. That's not necessary at all, right? So I'm just going to get rid of it after it's done with it. And I assume that I didn't actually look before, but I assume that also similarly inside the STB library, I could, after init font, I could free font, right? I'm assuming that after init font, there is a way to free the font. Don't know that for sure. Maybe that's not true. Maybe he doesn't actually allocate anything. Give enough to the file that defines the font. This function builds necessary info that you must allocate. STB font necessary yourself. STB init font will fill it out. You don't need to do anything special to free it because the comments are pure value data. So I don't. That's it. It's not even, doesn't even require any memory. It just kind of does its magic and leaves us alone. So yeah, so I guess that's it. That's the entirety of the cleanup. So all we really have to do now is deal with this, right? We just have to deal with this stuff, right? So yeah, I mean, really, what we're talking about is doing this stuff, the loaded bitmap free stuff. That's crazy, totally crazy, but fine by me. Fine by me. If it makes it easier, it makes it easier. So anyway, when we do the font stuff, we do add character asset. We come through here, we get our code point bitmap out, and so now what we need to do is make a loaded bitmap that we can actually use as our asset. So I start by making one. I guess we should also do a thing here that actually takes a look at the TTF file stuff, right? And doesn't actually try to do that unless it gets this back. Not really necessary because this is, again, offline, but might as well do that. So if I go in here, where did it go, though? I deleted what I needed. There it is. So I'm going to define one of these loaded bitmaps. I am going to do a result free on that, like so. To do read results, that'll be TTF file contents. We've got none of this is necessary. None of this is necessary at all. So the memory here is what we would actually have to allocate, right? So this is actually not true. We're not going to free the contents. The memory here is what we have to allocate. We know the width and the height. So what we would do here is we'd basically say, you know, the thing that we free is the memory, right? And we would malloc size enough for our bitmap, which is just, you know, a U32 width times height, like so. And that's really about it. Now, I feel like we want this to potentially be padded as well. So we should probably deal with the pitch, I'm guessing, as a separate thing. But I don't know if we actually ever did that. Yeah, so there we go. We've got sort of our pitch equals result width times bitmap bytes per pixel. So we do actually still have the pitch stuff in there, right? So I'll go ahead and add that in as well. Font. There we go. Okay. So if I were to do it this way, I can then say, all right, what I want to malloc is basically whatever the pitch is times the width. That gives me enough space. I assume this is a void star that comes out. So I'll grab that memory, and then that's what we actually want to free when this thing is done. We don't care about any of this stuff. We don't care about this. This now operates exactly the same way, right? It's just exactly the same code that we already did. After it's done, we free everything, and then we're left with the loaded bitmap that we need. Now, I don't actually know, I don't remember at all how we actually deal with that stuff. So if you look at load BMP, right, it returns a loaded bitmap. So what I might do is just mirror that and say that there's also a loaded bitmap one that's like get font or get glyph bitmap, right? That kind of just does exactly the same thing as the loaded bitmap one. So we do get glyph bitmap and we say carousel file name. And that just kind of lets me lean on that a little bit. So I can say these both work in the exact same way. So now if you wanted to, if you want to load a bitmap from a file, you call this. If you want to get a glyph, you call this. And I guess I just need the code point here, U32 code point. And so then the only difference is then I'm going to pass the code point in here, right, instead of just picking n. Now we probably also want to do a size, but I'm going to hold off on that for a second. Again, we'll kind of come back through probably tomorrow or maybe next week and put in the stuff about like character alignment and stuff, because we have a bunch of stuff we need to do there. But okay, so we do add character asset. What add character asset is going to do is it's to do the exact same code as add bitmap asset, right? Because it's the exact same thing. The only difference is where it gets its loaded bitmap from, right? So when you see the load BMP call there, right? I guess when we do add bitmap asset, it's delayed, right? It's a delayed kind of add, right? Yeah. So basically, it comes down here, and it does, when it goes to actually write them out, it does the load right on sort of the write, right? When the write would happen. So what I can do is I can just make another path here if I want to for my fonts. I can say asset type font or something here, right? And then I can just do exactly this path, right? I can say, all right, when I'm going to do that, I do exactly the same thing, but now I do, load glyph bitmap, like so. I pass it the file name and like the code point or something, and we'll figure out how to get that in a second. It does the same exact stuff that it did here before, and then it just f-writes that out exactly the same way, right? I mean, really, I almost want this code path to be shared. In fact, I could do that. What I could do is do it like this, right? So I don't have to have two of these. I could do like something more like, yeah, I could do something more like loaded bitmap, bitmap, and then do this. If source type equals asset type font, else, right? And now they share it, the path, and that seems much nicer to me, right? Okay, so let's keep looking here. So this, we need an asset type font up here, and now we need a way to store the code point as well. And of course, first sample index, I guess we could just do it this way, right? Code point, like so. Makes sense? Again, really, really basic stuff. I'm doing nothing other than like pure autopilot right now. Pure autopilot on just what I'm looking at what our source code did before. I don't even remember how we wrote this thing. My brain's been so out of lately, I have no idea. So I'm just on pure autopilot going, well, we had a system in place. I'm just following that system, right? And that's totally fine. So there's our load glyph bitmap. So all we need now is just a way to record the fact that we wanted to do one of these. And so when we look at one of these things here, for add bitmap asset, right, we can do the exact same code. It seems like there's a lot of it is the only thing. And so I do worry a little bit about that. And I wonder if these need to be compressed together. I'm not sure, right? It's something I would look at. Since this is the asset processor, and this is kind of more just example, I don't know that I care that much, but it is something that just makes me a little bit like, oh, maybe, right? But yeah, so there's the code point, like so. The rest of this stuff is pretty much exactly the way that it appears, right? And the align percentages, again, are not really particularly relevant here. We can use those the same at the moment because we're going to have to do some other stuff for font alignment either way. Okay, so there we go. Let's go ahead and, what did I do wrong here? Read file results. It's called entire file. Entire file. Font file. File name. Free is contents. That's totally wrong. That's supposed to be contents. Result is the result, which is this. And I think we're almost done, right? Add character asset should be returning a bitmap ID, I guess, would be what that would return. And then we have a warning. And actually, let's look at bitmap used. That is true because these need to be trimmed. Thank you, compiler. That was a good catch. So there you go. That is the test asset generator. So if I go into the data directory, so handmade data, right? And I want to, I assume that these don't have full paths in them, right? I assume that they just write things out. So if I go into the data directory and I go ahead and run our generator, it's kind of a Hail Mary pass at this point because all we did was just slam a bunch of code in there. We have no idea what it's going to do. But we might as well try it anyway. I mean, we're at the end of the stream. What could possibly go wrong? Well, I guess a lot of things. But test asset builder, let's go ahead and run it. That does not look good. Actually, I guess we can just click debug the program in Visual Studio. Oh my God, no. Oh no, I picked the old version. All right, this is bad news. I don't know what's going on here. Oh no. Oh my goodness. Oh. I don't know what's going on here. That's some bad news right there. Okay, well, let's try that. Let's try that again. That was very dangerous. Please exit, Mr. Developer Studio. I didn't mean. I think I clicked the wrong version. There, that was bad. Let's try that again. First of all, I think that was just a. That might be a very thing we could just catch by inspection. But that's hilarious. Don't ever accidentally click the wrong version of Visual Studio, I guess, or you end up with your crazy old white color scheme or whatever that was, Visual Studio 2005 or something. I don't even know what that was loading. I have no idea. This machine is very old and probably has some things on it which should be removed, but which have not been removed yet by any stretch of the imagination. So let me double check that just real quickly. After we call get code point bitmap, we are going to free mono bitmap. That seems reasonable. When we malloc the memory here for result pitch, this is wrong. That's probably pretty much the entirety of that error, right? We weren't computing the size of the bitmap is obviously going to be the height times the pitch, not the width times pitch. We've done that many times on Handmade Hero, so that was just kind of dumb. So there we go. So now we have our test2.hha got bigger, but we don't actually know if any of that worked. We don't know what any of that did, right? That was just pure conjecture. So before I go to the Q&A, which it is now time for, let's just go ahead and straight up try it, right? We're doing our particle bit RD things here. So right, like we've got the heads. Let's try to change the heads to be fonts, right? So in there, when we set that bitmap ID, we'll get a random bitmap from asset font instead, and we'll see what happens, right? Awesome. So there's all our letters going through the asset pack file. And, I suppose if we wanted to do something a little bit fancier, we wanted to maybe stick with the nothings theme. We could restrict our fonts to only the letters NOTHINGS, for example. What we could do there is we could use our asset tag matching system to pick out the correct tag, right? And so if you remember, we have some code, and it's not going to be very efficient. Like, this could be pretty slow. We probably would want to build this table ahead of time because we're sort of forcing. We have not ever optimized anything in the asset tag matching system, so this is pushing it. But if I go ahead and say get best match asset, right, what I could do here is I could pass the trans state assets, right? I could give it the asset font as the type ID, and then give it an asset vector that was the match vector, and an asset vector that was the weight vector. And both of these would have absolutely nothing in them other than the Unicode code point, right? So we'd basically say the Unicode code point that we want, let's say, is n. Did we say capital? I think we said capital letters. And then we just do, okay, we've got a match vector and a weight vector, and we're just pulling it out by the tag. And the tag is n, right? Go. Go for it. Oh, but you know what? You actually got to use that. You can't just call that. You got to actually use it. There we go. So this will get that best match asset. No operator which takes a right hand of what are you complaining about? Right hand operator of February 282 could be bitmap ID operator equals. We'll try to match the arbitrary list bitmap ID uint32. Not sure I follow that. What does get best match asset? Oh, because it's get best match bitmap from. That's what we actually want. Right? There we go. So there's the n. And so we want it to basically say nothings, right? We want it to say nothings. So what we would do there is we would pick a random one from here. So I guess what I'll do is I'll literally just do just the dumbest possible thing. Here's that effects entropy. So we'll say, switch random. We've got our random choice stuff in here, right? We'll just do random choice, array count, nothings, right? Or you know what? Even simpler. Just say random choice from array count nothings. Use that effects entropy to get us a random letter from Sean's handle, right? Just say nothings, bracket, and then we will just put in that string. Char nothings equals nothings. Right? Seems reasonable. There it is. A little bit big still, but I think we're basically done here. I think our work here is done, people. I think our work here is done. Right? So there you go. That's how you use a library. 99% of your success in using a library is using a library that Sean made. Pretty much full stop. Occasionally there's other people who have made libraries into the Sean style, and they can be good as well. So, those are the criteria to look for. One file, very good sign. API that literally does what you want, like word for word. Like, I want to get a code point bitmap, there's a function called getCodePointBitmap, and it gives me back the bitmap, right? Directly. Trivial to integrate with no build options, no nothing, 2 lines of code to integrate, You look at all these things, that's what makes a great library, right? That was trivial to do, trivial to use. You will not have that experience with basically anything else. You would still have been fussing with like apt-get if you were trying to use something else, right? But here we were able to like get it working immediately and then integrate it in our asset pipeline trivially, and that's just fabulous. So that is basically an episode of Handmade Hero that pretty much concretely shows you why I always answer the question, what libraries would you use if you were using libraries on Handmade Hero with, I would use the STB libraries because they're just that good. And with that, I will go to the Q&A. So if you have questions about what we did, I would be happy to answer them. Please prefix your questions with Q: so I can see them. And off we go. The A is the best match for the null terminator. Ha! That's right. So I didn't quite do that. I should not have said array count. Should be array count -1 because it does have the null terminator in there, right? because array count will count the null terminator that's at the end of this. So really, we just want array count nothings -1. That'd be a little bit better, right? James Woodman, until tonight, I thought there was a use case for CMake, which is that if the user compiles the program, it finds libraries that you don't need to know where they're installed. But now it seems the STB way is the only reasonable default. I think I'm done with CMake for the foreseeable future. I would agree with everything you just said. My experience is that build programs are only useful because libraries and programs are constructed poorly, and that if you just construct them properly, you can usually build even a very large code base by just using a one-file build. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that that's always what you want to do. It just means that build tools are extraneous. Now, you have to make a decision there about whether you're going to go that path or not, you know? But it definitely is true that if you do things in a certain way, it forces you into this whole make nightmare where everything has to be a make file and you're debugging your builds all the time and there's all this kind of other nonsense and, oh, you had the wrong version of CMake, or, oh, CMake passes the wrong switches. Where are the switches? Oh, they're baked into CMake, and oh my, I've had horrible things happen on projects with CMake that I've had to work on. I'll spare you the gory details of trying to build Clang one time. Oh my lord, that's a nightmare if you want to build Clang statically linked. I actually had to send a document to John Blow to tell him how to do it because he was trying to do it. And like I had already gone through the pain and suffering of doing it. So you can make decisions that make you not have to deal with any of that. And I highly recommend considering it because for a lot of projects, it's way saner not to go that route. External libraries, malloc free. What's next? A Java virtual machine. So yeah, for the asset processor, you want a Java virtual machine? Go nuts, right? Because it's just a thing that I just don't, it's not really part of Handmade Hero to me. It's just there to show you some stuff about how, you know, you would need to do some things. So if you want a Java virtual machine in your asset processor, go nuts. Have at it. Canucles, you have used the library and there are riots raging in the streets. I see shadows of pitchforks cast by torchlights of the rabid crowd. Run, Casey, I'll do my best to slow them down. Tips his hat with a last farewell gaze. So I feel like also what I might do tomorrow is show you how to do the exact same thing without a library, if only to emphasize just how bad another API can be, because we can call Windows and have it do the exact same thing, but it's really annoying, right? How would you write debug info now? Debug info of what? Also, if you make the hero spew out letters of my nickname at random, at least till the end of the Q&A, holy hell, I will be so happy. Well, if you wanted that to happen, why didn't you write a TrueType rasterizing font library, man? You know, you got to earn it. I noticed Molly Rocket in one of the comments of the STB file. Did you make contributions? Not to this library. That is because I think he was crediting someone from the forums. Right? So he's crediting someone from the Molly Rocket forums from the old days. It looks like this episode was brought to us by the letter N. Yes, that is totes true, man. Totes true. This episode is brought to you by the letter N. And so, by the way, like, also you can kind of see that that's pretty easy. So if you wanted to rasterize stuff at runtime, I don't know how efficient STB TrueType is, but I assume it's probably pretty efficient. So it might even be a good choice for people who wanted to not pre-rasterize their fonts, you know. Now you know. Looks like there are no further questions. Is that correct? Rephrase. How would you output sentences to see debug strings like FPS or error codes? Well, we haven't quite gotten there yet. So hold on to that question, because that is what, that's what like next week is about, right? So hold on. Is the debug text going to be spewing forth out of the Handmade hero's head? Let's hope not. That'd be really hard to read. No more questions? Canucles, I'm curious, what do you look at when hiring an artist? I have no idea how you apply for that. After watching a few episodes of Double Fine Adventure, I'm in awe at how good artists at Double Fine seem to be, and what kind of richnesses you have to be one of those. You also seem to practice more intelligent and humane approaches to hiring. So I guess here's what I'd say. I don't feel super qualified to speak on that topic at the moment. Until Molly Rocket ships some successful games with good art, I think it's premature for me to talk about artist hiring, right? It's a new thing for me. Doing a real game project at Molly Rocket where there's like actual people working on it and stuff is a new thing for me. And I feel like any advice that I have to give at this point is largely speculative. It would mostly be saying what my approach to hiring has been so far, but I have no data on whether it's good. And so I feel like that's really a question. Ask me in 2 years after some of this stuff has had more time to play out, and I'll be able to answer that question a little more intelligently. That's about all I can say about that. Cuber Caleb, it's almost 1 a.m. Please tell me this won't be a normal thing. Well, it used to be the standard time was 8 p.m. And then we switched it to 5 p.m. Because it's better for my schedule. And so, no, it won't be a normal thing because my schedule doesn't really permit the 8 p.m. streams for the most part. So, no, it won't be normal. But that used to be normal. All good? All good? No more questions. Questions and answers. No more questions and or answers. I feel like the answer is that there are no more questions and answers. All right. Can you input a tilde sign in Emacs with your config? Because I can't. Yeah. Sure. I do it all the time on Handmade Hero even. That's what you're looking for? I don't look for a practical advice, just interested how you do it now. Often my friends tell me I can't give you objective answer data. Screw it, I want your opinion. Yeah, I mean, I wasn't saying that like I'm trying to tell you that you know, that I thought you were asking me for concrete advice or anything like that. I was saying like I would rather not talk about it yet because I don't feel like I have the background to really speak on it intelligently yet. So I would prefer to wait for a year or two and have a more informed opinion about it before I start saying anything about that. Like, I feel like me giving advice on how to build a studio right now is really pretty dumb because it's just, I don't have a well enough formed opinion. I just have things I'm trying, and once I have enough of them sort of tried and see how they go, then I will be able to speak more intelligently on it. Ever thought of special episodes with guests, bonus episodes done on specific topics by someone else, being a rad debugger with Jeff, or being a Blender Digital programmer with Fabian? I already asked Fabian to do a stream on optimization for us. He said he was interested in that. So my hope is that yes, that will be coming, but that is more for a little later on in the project. I was thinking that, you know, later on when the game is more full-fledged, we would maybe see if he wanted to kind of go through some stuff and go, you know, how would you take a look at optimizing this? You know, what would you focus on? How would you test it? What's your approach? You know, so yes, I'm very interested in that. It's maybe something for a little bit further down the road, but I am very interested in that. Gasto 5, is formatting coming tomorrow? Formatting might not be tomorrow. Because like I said, I might show how to do what we did today without a library tomorrow, just for, you know, completeness sake, in case anyone cares. But, you know, formatting would probably start next week at least, would be my guess. GGC 2002, I assume that the bot has already answered you, probably, but the new language you're probably referring to is JAI, developed by John Blow, the guy who did Braid and who's now doing The Witness, that he is developing, which is like specifically made with like the pragmatic programmer in mind. And it's been kind of going along really well, even though it's only a spare time thing for him. We good? We good? Looks like it. All right. I'm gonna go probably to bed. All right, guys. We're going to wrap it up here. Go ahead and close this down. Thank you for joining me for another episode of Handmade Hero. I hope you have enjoyed this episode. This is the one and only time that I'll probably ever show you how to use a library, but I am proud to show how to use an STB library because, like I said, it's one of the only kinds that I can wholeheartedly endorse. And so if you've never used an STB library, I hope I've done a good job on this stream in showing you the reasons why it's really so much more useful and more satisfying than a lot of other libraries you might choose. And I highly recommend checking out the ones that Sean has made available. They are all really very useful. And like I said on Handmade Hero, we won't be using any libraries in the game, so it is library free. In the asset processor, I'd be fine with leaving the STB thing in there. I have no problem with leaving libraries in the asset processor, but in general, we won't be using any libraries in Handmade Hero proper. So I am not using any STB libraries there, but like I've said many times before when people ask me, I would have no qualms about doing so. I simply don't use the STB libraries on Handmade Hero because I want to show everyone how to write the game from scratch. It's for educational purposes. It's not because there's anything wrong with the STB libraries. The STB libraries are a great service to humanity, and if you are working on a game and feel like you might want to use a library for something, they are the ones to look at first for sure. So I hope I've given you a good introduction to that, and I hope that you find them to be useful, and I hope that you take some time to thank Sean Barrett for them. If you would like to find him, you can find him right here. This is his Twitter, and not only can you follow him on Twitter, if you would like to do that, you can also check out his Twitch page, because like me, he streams programming streams. Actually, I guess it's not Nothings. What is it? It's Nothings 2. or something like this. He's got it in here somewhere. There it is, Nothing's 2. If you want to check out his Twitch channel, you can also watch him programming his like Minecraft engine that he was working on. You can subscribe to his Twitch channel. It's twitch.tv/nothings2. So that's the guy who made that library and the other great libraries that go along with it. I highly recommend checking them out and saying hi to Sean when you get a chance, and checking out his Twitch channel if you want to see him programming. That is it for today's episode. If you wanted to follow along at home with the code, you can always go to handmadehero.org and pre-order the source code. Pre-order the game, and it comes with all the source code. Even now, as we're building it, you can get it every night after I'm done coding. You can also, if you just want to support this video series because you like it, you can support our Patreon page. We also have a forums site that you can go to and ask questions, and we've got a tweet bot that you can go to find out the schedule. So check those out. I'm too sleepy to talk more about them right now. Maybe on the next stream. So until tomorrow, which will be the normal time, 5 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time. Until then, everyone, have fun coding, and I will see you guys on the internet.